It's game week for the Ohio State Buckeyes and the Michigan Wolverines. And as we continue our preview this week, we're going to take a look this morning at how Ohio State's offense stacks up against Michigan's defense. Where might the Buckeyes have an advantage, if at all? And frankly, where can they be better and different than they were the last couple years where things just flat out didn't go quite well enough? It's all coming up next as we dive in here on Buckeye Breakdown. We've got the whole crew together as we cover Ohio State with our instant analysis from Ohio State.
There's something that doesn't feel right.
Unbelievable effort from him today. Is E.J. Liddell going to crack the first team All Big Ten?
I think he can be the guy. I'm not trying to start a quarterback controversy.
He seems to have the durability. He certainly has the toughness. This is the question on a lot of people's minds here. Welcome to Buckeye Breakdown. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Buckeye Breakdown. We're part of the BuckeyesNow family on the Sports Illustrated Media Group inside the Fan Nation Network. Glad to have you with us. Alongside Anthony Moeglin, I'm Brendan Gulick. If this is the first time you've joined us, that's great. We'd love to have you. And I know there are a lot of people that are kind of jumping in here as everybody gets ready for the game this weekend. We certainly would appreciate it if you supported our content by subscribing to this YouTube channel, and certainly know that for all the latest news and info on the team, we got you covered over on BuckeyesNow.com. All right, Ant, this is a fun one because we're going to talk Ohio State offense against Michigan defense. And, you know, these are two groups that seem to be clicking pretty well. You know, Michigan I don't know if I want to call it stumbling the last 2 weeks, but they haven't looked quite as dominant. And that's been more of an offensive thing than a defensive thing. I think their defense is still playing pretty well. Where the Buckeyes, the last couple weeks, you know, the defense has been terrific all season. I know Kyle McCord last week didn't look quite at his best, but he still played fine. But as a whole, this offense is starting to really come together. And I think you got two units here that we're going to talk about today that are kind of peaking at the right time, which is exactly what you want.
Yeah, no question. And it's really fun to start getting into the football stuff, the football side of this, watching the tape, watching their team. It's going to be going back to the old Ohio State, Michigan games and just seeing the clash, man. You just get all fired up because of what this rivalry is. And honestly, when our offense is on the field, to put it, not to sugarcoat it, we're going to have our hands full. This defense is very, very good. Having said that, they haven't played too many teams. Like when you compare schedule to schedule, like they haven't played anybody that would scare you outside of last week when they played Maryland. No one's been able to do really anything on this defense. And the reason is they not only are they tough and they play this really tough brand of football, but when they're clicking well, their offense and their defense really play good complementary football where it's hard nosed, run the ball, eliminate a lot of the clock and then let your defense kind of get after it because they get teams behind and then they can really pin their ears back and really get after opposing offenses. So Ohio State will have their hands full and they're going to need to show up on Saturday and have a really nice game.
I think the only thing that you can do is evaluate the tape that's in front of you, right? That's all you've got in terms of how do they actually go out and execute it. But like everybody else that's looking at this Michigan team, I almost feel like there's this delineation, this Connor Stalions era, and then this post-Connor Stalions team, because they knew what was coming, right? Mm-hmm. And so I wonder how good teams were at disguising signs, before all of this stuff came out. Theoretically, it sounds like everybody in the Big Ten sort of knew this was going on, that this was, not a well-guarded secret within the confines of the conference. So theoretically, as a team, you should be able to do some things to change your signals or whatever you got to do. I know it's not quite that cut and dry. I know it's not quite that easy, but without Connor on the sideline the last couple of games now, and then certainly without Jim Harbaugh on the sideline, and now that their linebackers coach Chris Partridge has been fired, it is a little bit of a different feel for Michigan, and I am a little curious to see after Saturday, okay, what happened here, right? Is this Was it a game that Ohio State moved the ball at will against a defense that didn't know what was coming? Did the Buckeyes struggle anyways because Michigan truly is that good defensively? It feels like, the old saying, beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
There are going to be some people that are all about what they've seen from Michigan because you're right. There have definitely been some really, really good defensive performances. And I don't know if everybody agrees that it was a level playing field.
Yeah, kind of to that point, if you go the past 3 games, which is where things have kind of changed, go back to 3 games ago against Purdue, and that was like the week that it all happened, and it all kind of was breaking down, and stuff was starting to come to light. They came out and just kind of rolled Purdue, and we know what Purdue is. Purdue's not very good. Then you go into Penn State, and that game was like watching paint dry. I mean, both sides of the ball just kind of struggling. Like, we know what Penn State is now. And I know that their offensive attack isn't very good. They were able to put a score in late, but that was kind of a hard fought game and end up winning by 9 points, 24-15. And they hold Penn State to 70 yards through the air. And, I know that pass game struggles, but the big one to really look at is last week in College Park against Maryland. And because it was 31-24 was the final. And with that, they had a defensive touchdown on a strip sack fumble. They had a safety. Well, they had 2 safeties, a safety caused from a block kick and then a safety caused from a relatively questionable, in my opinion, intentional grounding. It was 3rd down, backed up. It would have, stuff would have happened. It wouldn't have changed the game necessarily, but you end up winning 31-24. And it's like, okay, when you look at that one, like what was Maryland able to do? And where you can find it is in the second half of the game because it was 24-3 at halftime and Michigan was really rolling. And then they come out and Talia Tungavailoa flipped a switch. And I'm telling you, when I say accurate, like he was like pinpoint accurate. And it wasn't just close throws. He had no throw under 13 yards except for one, the last one. So everything was vertically down the field and the balls were placed perfectly because frankly, Michigan's defensive backs are pretty good, and they can turn the ball over, they can deflect passes and pick it off. But when you were really accurate, and you saw it last week, that's where Maryland was able to get their chunk plays and start really moving the ball up and down the field on that Michigan defense.
So while Michigan's defense maybe didn't have a great performance last week, they certainly were opportunistic. They played fine, but they weren't dominant like they had been. Ohio State seems to be clicking at the right time offensively, especially in terms of the run game. And kind of like I had mentioned that it feels like there's almost this first portion of the season for Michigan's defense and then the Purdue game on after all of this off the field stuff, which really actually was more on the field. I almost feel like that's a good way to describe Ohio State right now too, because you've sort of got this chunk of the season that TreVeyon Henderson wasn't what we know TreVeyon can be. And that obviously started with, where things were when he got injured in the Notre Dame game and missed some time. And, everybody starts questioning, is this going to be the thing that follows him for so long? Can he get and stay healthy? And TreVeyon eventually said, hey, look, last year I rushed back. I wanted to be back. I forced myself to be back, and I wasn't 100%. And I learned from it this time around and, wanted to make sure that I absolutely 100% could be myself when I came back. And while that may have been frustrating for everybody, probably him included in the moment, boy, are we are grateful that he approached it that way, because what we've seen from TreVeyon Henderson the last 4 games now is pretty remarkable. He's run for 499 yards those last 4 games, so it's 125 yards a game. As a team, the Buckeyes have ran for 712. They're averaging 178 yards per game on the ground during that 4-game stretch. It feels like this offense has an entirely different level of explosiveness with a healthy TreVeyon because of the way he can make a play go from an 8-yard gain to a 40-yard gain.
Mhm. He's going to be such a huge difference maker on Saturday because I think that, last year, looking at our stats in that game, you rushed for 143 yards, which is pretty good against a tough defense. But one of the places that I think Michigan lacks on defense, and it's at their linebacker position. They got two guys, Junior Colson and Michael Barrett, and they're not the fastest guys. And we saw two or 3 weeks ago against Indiana or not against Indiana, against it was Rutgers, where Travion had a couple big plays where he was just outrunning guys, right? Just remember that check down catch where he took it up the sidelines and went for 70 yards, stuff like that. Where when you get these guys in space, there's a really good example last Saturday where, again, Talia just checks it down to a running back run-in, just straight up the field 3 yards and turn right, just a quick little check down, and he beats Barrett to the edge, and he gets around it and makes a big gain. So you see little things like that where it's like, oh, if there's a good place with our running backs to make a difference, Chip Trayanum's going to come and he's going to get some tough yards if he needs it. But we know with Travion that he's got that combination of power and speed that he can punch in the mouth, but he can also get around you. And I think that he's poised to have a really, really big game if he gets the opportunity, if our offensive line up front gets him going.
We touched on this a little bit yesterday when I was down at the Woody and we talked afterward. Ohio State didn't have to beat Michigan on September 2nd or October 14th or even November 4th, right? Like there's been a buildup to this game, and I think both teams are grateful for that. But from an Ohio State perspective, they needed that time to develop on the offensive line and to develop a young quarterback. And I'm not sitting here making excuses. I'm just saying that Ohio State at the beginning of the year, I didn't feel great about their ability to go beat Michigan, knowing that the formula the last couple of years was what it was. Smashmouth football, you got to be able to run the ball. And Ohio State's offensive line early didn't look good. And I think if I'm being fair, I think those guys still need to get a little better, but they are, as a group, playing substantially better football than they were a couple months ago. So if I'm an Ohio State fan, I go into this game feeling confident, frankly, for 3 reasons. One, supposedly the playing field is level now, right? Michigan theoretically doesn't know your signals, or at least you should have had enough time to be able to install what you need to install, because if they were at your games earlier in the season, this has gone on long enough now that hopefully, theoretically, you should have been able to fix that problem. So I'm assuming Ohio State is taking care of that. 2, Travion Henderson is full go Trey, and that has proven to be the last few weeks an enormous difference maker. And 3, the offensive line looks like it's gelling. So I would go into this game saying, okay, you're basically at full health offensively for the first time against Michigan in a few years. I mean, think about it just from Travion's perspective. Last year, not even close to being healthy. 2 years ago, that wasn't there. He was dealing with some lingering effects from concussions a couple years ago, and last year the foot and the ankle were really bothering him to the point that he wasn't able to play. I mean, it was Chip Trayanum, and that was it. Everybody thought after the second to last game of the year that it was going to basically be like the Dallin Hayden show against Michigan last year, and it turns out the Buckeyes brought linebacker Chip Trayanum over from the other side of the ball, and he certainly looked good. I think he ran for like 83 yards or something on 14 carries. And he proved his physicality, and there were a lot of Buckeye fans going, okay, let's see this guy in the backfield. But he's not Travion Henderson. And even all that early noise in the beginning of the year about, hey, that's really running back 1, he's wearing 19. No, it's not. And you can see why now with 32 out of the field.
Yeah, no question. And we've talked about it a bunch. This offense finds its success when the run game is going. When teams have to respect the run game and have to account for Travion Henderson because they're getting gash plays and the offensive line is creating good space, that's when the passing game really explodes. And I think that that's going to be so critical on Saturday afternoon. Like the offensive line, this game, we could talk all the bells and whistles on the outside, and we could talk Travion. It's going to come down to what the offensive line does, because this defensive line that we're going to face is good. It's good. They're led on the edge by Jalen Harrell, who has 6.5 sacks, but going across the board, they rotate about 8 guys in. And these guys hustle to the ball. They're big in the interior. They're going to have 4 down linemen. Really kind of be your standard like 4-3 look where everyone's hand's going to be in the dirt, and their 4 down linemen are stout, and their 2 in the middle are going to be big guys. So if the Buckeyes can move them and make space in the run game and protect in the pass game, I'll tell you what, like this offense has an opportunity to get loose and put up a ton of points.
I think Michigan's interior defensive linemen are going to be the best Ohio State's seen this year.
Yes.
They're good. They are legit. And, you know, you hear so often about an offense that's trying to get better in the run game. You got to get your offensive linemen to the second level, right? You got to get some blocks on linebackers. And I think that will be a challenge for Ohio State's offensive line, because those defensive tackles eat up blocks. And then it's, you know, oftentimes one-on-one, right? And I like Travion Henderson in one-on-one matchups and trying to make somebody miss. He's pretty elusive, but he certainly isn't, you know, going to elude every tackler. So I think there's got to be an element of the design, the scheme for Ohio State's rushing attack to figure out how to get, you know, an advantage in terms of where you're trying to move the ball. And, you know, I trust the progress that this offensive line has made. But if they don't have, you know, a hats advantage, that's going to be tough.
Yeah, it'll be tough. And I think you're going to see Ohio State try to run, you know, establish the run early, because when you look back, I was looking back to last year's tape. They found a lot of success with Chip Trayanum with gap scheme run. So gap scheme run as opposed to zone running, where in a gap scheme, that's when you see pulling guards and pulling tackles getting into a hole and the running back following, having one cut, one hole, and just following guys, and it's really physical. The zone stuff is more finesse, where you kind of stretch it out, and you have the running back can make any type of cutback at once. The offensive line combo blocks and gets to the second level. I think you're going to see a lot more of the first version, that gap scheme version stuff, where, hey, we're going to get downhill fast, and we're going to pull an extra blocker, whether it's to the right or to the left, and we're going to have Travion Henderson just follow guys into these holes and then just explode through them, because they found a lot of success doing that last year. And it takes, if you're able to seal those holes and get those good initial blocks, you know, with the zone scheme running, it takes the decisions out of the running back's head. You have one hole and you're going to go as fast as you can right through it, and that's how you start going downhill and find a lot of those big chunk runs.
If you're Michigan defensively, how are you trying to play this Ohio State team? Because obviously the scouting report starts with 18, right? I mean, you got to know, okay, where's Marv, and how can we make sure this guy doesn't beat us? But Emeka Egbuka looks healthy now, and he's got his bounce back. Cade Stover certainly looks like Cade. I mean, you know, is he 100%? No, but it was healthy enough to play last week. And I thought played pretty well against Minnesota. You know, there's no keeping that kid off the field this weekend. I'm trying to figure out, like, if I'm Michigan trying to limit an Ohio State offense that has explosives at both levels, where would you try to defend them?
So you got to start by taking away the big play, just like you said. And it does start with 18. But for Michigan, it also starts with Emeka Egbuka, because Egbuka torched him last year, right? Yeah. But Emeka and CJ were just on the same page all day long, or all afternoon long, I should say, last year. And Emeka had a really big game. So it's like those two guys, that's where you start. Like, okay, let's keep everything contained. Let's work from the top down. Let's make sure nothing gets behind us. And you start with those two guys and making it tough on them. And then you think, hey, what's Ohio State going to try to do? Where have they been successful? Well, they get success, and Kyle McCord gets a rhythm when he's throwing off a good run game. So once we account for Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka, don't let Kyle get easy throws early, and then force this Ohio State team to have to establish the run, because I would say if there's one place that you're going to challenge Ohio State, it's going to be Michigan trying to make Kyle McCord be deadly accurate. We saw last week Talia was deadly accurate and found some success. If you watch the first half of last year and even into the third quarter of last year before some of those big plays started stacking up, CJ was having his best game of maybe all year. I mean, he was dead nuts on. He was throwing. He could have dropped it on a dime, and he was just accurate as heck. You think of that one throw up the sidelines to Marvin in the face of a blitz, a 40-yard shot. I mean, that literally, it would have landed right on the sideline had it gone through Marvin's hand. So that's where if I'm Michigan, I'm like, all right, let's take away anything easy early, stop the run, and force Kyle McCord to beat you with accuracy. Because if there's one place that they can find an advantage, it would be there.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess I generally agree with that. There's a lot on Kyle's shoulders, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he has to be brilliant. I don't think he has to be a world beater. And like, I'm not talking about game manager. He's better than that. And frankly, I don't really even like that term as a quarterback. Kyle has shown an ability to make some big throws this year. It hasn't been consistent the way we saw from CJ, last year against Georgia in particular. But I don't think it needs to be. If Kyle can protect the ball, I really think this offense is going to have a good shot to get rolling. Mm-hmm. Because while this is an Ohio State offense versus Michigan defense focused, conversation, when we get to the point now soon here where we'll flip sides of the ball, I love Ohio State's defense against anybody. And I don't really expect that Michigan's going to go off offensively. And so I think this is going to come down to, can the Buckeyes offensively get rolling? Can they score touchdowns on consecutive possessions and apply some pressure? And how does the offense in general, but specifically, how does Kyle McCord respond to the roller coaster of emotions throughout the game in a hostile environment? For sure. Yeah. I really think that's a huge part of this.
Yeah. And I would add to what my last point was. I don't think Kyle can't do that. I would say that that would be the one place where if you're Michigan, you're like, hey, this is where we're going to really force it, because anytime there's a ball within 5 yards of Marvin Harrison, he's more than likely coming down with it. So it's like, hey, Kyle, let's just force Kyle to kind of be on. To your point, I think that turnovers are going to be massive in this game, and I don't think it's in the kind of the normal sense where it's like, hey, turnovers are going to lead to points, because I think just like you that this Michigan offense is really struggling, and they're not going to be able to turn if an interception happens or a fumble. It's not going to be like, hey, automatic points. What it is, though, is going to be you're going to lose possessions. Like, this game is going to be super condensed because, we talked early on in the season when teams were trying to just take the air out of the football and not allow Ohio State to have many drives or get anything going. This is what it's going to feel like, because the way Michigan's been going the past couple of weeks, they're just running the football. So think about that. Like, this game's going to feel very short, and Ohio State's not going to have many opportunities to score. So when you do have the ball, it's critical that you keep it, and every drive ends in points, or as many as possible.
I wonder about the the Smashmouth mentality going into this game. Mm-hmm. That Ohio State the last few years has been so pass happy, not because they couldn't run the ball, but because they were so much deadlier on the arm of CJ Stroud and Justin Fields. Where the last couple of years, Michigan's basically, it's almost been like the most basic offensive game plan you can think of. Like, yeah, we think we can just beat them by running right at them down their throat over and over and over and over again. And they did, right? And I almost wonder if Ohio State has this this desire for revenge, in the same way that they had been beaten. If you look at some of the games over the years that Ryan Day has lost, it's almost like he goes out and tries to prove the next game that what beat them the previous game won't beat them again that day, or if you end up playing the same team the next time. And so I wonder if Ohio State is going to try to run the ball a little more than even normal to prove like, hey, yeah, we can run the ball. We don't care we're on the road. Sure, you ran it down our throats last year. Watch, we're going to do it to you this year. There's almost that borderline cockiness in the way he calls plays. And I like it, and it often works. I mean, what is he, 56-6? Pretty hard to argue with that, right? But I think Michigan probably would be best suited to look at Ohio State right now and say they're running the ball pretty effectively. Their offensive line's developed, and their top running back right now in Henderson is running like one of the best running backs in the country, and he leads the conference in rushing yards. So, I would think Michigan is going to approach this as I can't even believe I'm saying this, but Ohio State has a run-first offense this week.
Yeah, no question. And I think to your point in there too, like, I think that's the mark of a good coach too. Like, hey, we're going to make our weakness a strength, and frankly, they did get punched in the mouth. And I heard something really good. This goes way, way back to last year when Michigan had beat Ohio State for the second time. And it was that Ohio State has built their team to beat Georgia and to beat some of the big dogs, and Michigan built their team to beat Ohio State. So it's like it's that contrast in styles where it's worked the last 2 years. And now what we've been seeing is that this Ohio State team has been trending in that direction of physical football. We're going to punch you in the mouth, and then we're going to go off of that. So you love to see that. And you wonder, and two, you're going on the road, and I didn't confirm this before our show today, but the weather looks like it's going to be potentially some snow in the forecast, and being pretty cold, which you love to watch, right? That would be sweet. But it potentially have some bad weather, late November, Michigan on the road, hostile environment. Like, yeah, if you can establish the run early, that's a huge advantage for the team going forward. So I tend to agree with you right there. Like, hey, you think that Michigan or Ohio State is going to come out and try to beat Michigan at their own game and try to punch them in the mouth too, and have that nasty, hard-nosed mentality kind of going into it.
I'm seeing, at least on the Weather Channel app, Saturday, a high of 38. Winds are light and variable. The snow that you're talking about looks like it's now been pushed to Sunday. So fingers crossed we won't have snow on the ground, but it's going to be a cold November day up in Ann Arbor. So
yeah,
that's kind of what you expect, right?
Yeah, what you expect. And hey, get them going. Get the trenches fired up and get Travion going early, and then see what you can do after that.
I want to close on this note, and I think it's worth saying at some point in each of our videos previewing the week. I really hope, win or lose, and God, please let it be a win. I really hope we can genuinely enjoy this, because I remember the build-up for last year's game thinking, how can it get better than this? How does it get better, right? Yeah. This year, there are now, I believe, 13 top 5 matchups in this series history. And I believe this is the 4th time that the teams have both been ranked inside the top 3. So just from that perspective, it's a huge game. And like in the media, we're hyping this up, we're building this up. But I feel like a lot of it isn't manufactured, because the stakes are so high and they are changing so drastically next year, no matter what. Mm-hmm. We said this yesterday. This is basically a national quarterfinal. And I don't mean that disrespectfully to Iowa, whose defense has been terrific this year, whose offense has been non-existent. But if you lose this game, it just doesn't seem like there's a path to the college football playoff for the team that loses, especially if it's Michigan, because their strength of schedule is so weak. Mm-hmm. But even if it's Ohio State, like last year, Buckeye fans felt like, hey, maybe the season's over. I don't know. Maybe it's not. They got lucky and then 2 other games that went their way. And it was a pretty clear-cut path. When those 2 games wrapped, Ohio State was very clearly the next best team. And here we go after looking at the college football playoff rankings last night. Georgia's undefeated. Ohio State and Michigan are both undefeated and playing each other. Washington's still undefeated. They jumped to 4. Florida State is undefeated, and I know they lost their quarterback, but they're unbeaten in the ACC, sitting at 5. Oregon's going to play Washington in the Pac-12 title game. Oregon's only loss is to Washington so far. Texas is sitting at 7. Alabama's sitting at 8. Texas beat Alabama. Texas is going to play in the Big 12 championship game, we think, and probably against Oklahoma, if I had to take a guess. Maybe they avenge their loss, where Alabama, who lost to Texas, is going to play in the SEC title game and could probably put together the best win in the country if they beat Georgia in the SEC championship. There's too many things going on there that I think it would be really hard for an Ohio State-Michigan loser to stay top 4, given that they wouldn't play in a conference championship game next week. I don't think I'd say it's impossible, but it is very unlikely. And so the fact that the stakes are so high in this game, and that it's never going to be like this again, because the Big Ten is changing next year. No divisions, top 2 teams in the conference. I mean, you could go into this game next year and it's meaningless in the grand scheme of things. It'll never be meaningless because it's the rivalry game. But you could have already locked up a chance to play Michigan the following week. That is a hard thing for Ohio State fans to wrap their head around. So given what's at stake here and the cheating scandal thrown on top of it, and all the pressure that everybody's putting on Ryan Day because all of a sudden he's on the verge of being a coach that's lost this 3 years in a row. Yeah, there's a lot riding on this. Can't lose.
And it's going to be exciting. It's always exciting, but for everything you just said, it's just takes it over the top, and that's what you're most enjoying about it. The stakes are just so high, and like you said, it'll never be this way again. It's going to change and things are going to happen. It's going to be a fun week. And just like you said, a good reminder to just enjoy it. Enjoy Saturday. I paused the when I was watching the game from last year, like when they came out, it was the Sky Cam. They came out. It was right before opening kickoff, and just the sea of red. It was just 110 in the stadium. It's going to be the same environment, but just flip the colors to it. It's going to be really cool, and it's going to be an all timer. It has the potential to be an all timer.
What would you spend on a ticket?
Oh. What would I spend on a ticket? You're asking the wrong guy, because I would classify as very, 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 very cheap. But the max I would go probably $250, and I know that's probably not getting me. That ain't getting me into Ann Arbor. That's not getting me into Michigan for the weekend.
I think I saw yesterday the average secondary market price right now is $1,200.
Oh baby,
yeah.
So you wouldn't find me there.
If you're going to the Big House this weekend, you either got a ticket from somebody or you've got some disposable income. Yes. And good for you. Either way, congratulations on all of your success, and enjoy the game. And if you're a Buckeye fan, hope you're loud and have a ton of fun, because it's going to be an awesome environment. All right, that'll wrap our coverage here on this side of things. We will also come back with you here really soon, either later today, maybe early tomorrow. But probably later today on the Ohio State defense against Michigan offense, and trying to look at it from that perspective as well as we continue our week-long coverage, getting ready for the Buckeyes and the Wolverines. For all the latest news and info on Ohio State, BuckeyesNow.com is your favorite spot. We certainly hope. I know there's lots of places to consume your Ohio State content. And frankly, my colleagues on the beat do a really, really good job, and we're hopeful that you'll continue to make us part of your journey, and appreciate your support. And thanks for being with us on the YouTube channel here this morning as well. We'd love it if you'd subscribe to that. All right, for Anthony Moeglin, I'm Brendan Gulick. We'll see you soon. Ohio State, Michigan, just a couple days away now.